showing 12:01 Central, so let's get rolling on this. So for today's agenda, we're going to hit a few things. First, we're going to give a quick overview of what's going on out there right now. We'll keep this pretty brief because you guys are feeling it real time. Second, we're going to talk about what is a micro-internship. Again, just for folks who haven't heard the term before, or maybe they have and have some preconceived notions. Third, we're going to talk about some actionable strategies. We know every organization is in a different place with their early career program. Some companies are largely done recruiting, whether it's for the 2026 summer interns or full-time hires or even 27. Some companies haven't even begun or are still thinking about their plans. Some organizations are concerned about last-minute requests or renegs or anything else. So again, we'll talk about actionable strategies that you can put in place right now, irrespective of where you are in your process. Probably most exciting is we're going to talk about some funded programs that'll essentially allow you to do a proof of concept of this with no cost. And students are still paid and everything is fair, but through some generous support from a number of foundations and schools that let you see this. And as I said, I'll try to hit Q&A as we go through, but we'll leave some time at the end. So jumping right into it, again, some common early career program challenges. First of all, we know costs are continuing to increase. According to NACE, I think the cost is still north of $6,000 per hire. And even, I guess, almost more scary, almost 50% of first-year hires are leaving within the first year. So they're spending a bunch of money to get them in the door, spending even more money onboarding and training, and then they're leaving. The second thing that we're seeing is that there's difficulty keeping the right candidates engaged. Again, think about all of the times that you show up to a career fair, info session, and you meet great students, but you're not going to be on campus for another couple months. Well, we know students are blocking the recruiting emails. Or what about that first or second year student who seems great, but you're not offering internships or full-time roles until they're juniors or seniors? It's a lost opportunity, again, especially with students continuing to block emails. The application avalanche. I love this term, though it's really scary. 182% increase in the number of resumes and applications that companies are getting. 182%. That means they're filtering through tons of resumes. This is because of the one-click job application issue. And the other challenge with it is a lot of those individuals who are applying aren't really that interested in the organization. Again, they're clicking because of convenience as opposed to curiosity or commitment to your organization. And then the final thing is the attacks taking place on early career programs. Again, budgets are getting cut. Hiring managers are expressing frustration with new hires. Everyone is concerned about AI. Folks running early career programs are nervous. How do they continue to perform? Because we know how important these programs are. This is where Parker Dewey comes in. We're a 10-year-old organization, and 100% of what we do is help companies enhance what they're doing with their early career programs, helping them get great candidates, engage and assess those candidates, and ultimately make the right hires. The way we do this is through a concept of a micro-internship, which we'll talk more about. And the micro-internships come from over 5,000 colleges and universities across the US. They represent every major, every background, every sort of area of interest. And it's used by organizations ranging from startups to Fortune 100. The way organizations use these micro-internships and use Parker Dewey is really in 5 ways. Before campus visits, to build their pipelines of engaged candidates, to drive interest and awareness. The second is during those visits and after to, again, keep candidates warm and engaged and to provide insights on those companies to differentiate themselves from others. In building interview lists or prioritizing certain levels of engagement by getting insights on both the student's skills and their interests earlier in the process. For those organizations that can't visit campus, I just saw a Wall Street Journal article last week talking about companies continuing to limit the number of focus schools while recognizing great talent comes from beyond those schools. They're using Parker Dewey to continue to build those relationships with students, even if they can't be on campus. And then obviously, it's also a flexible resource. It's a way for busy professionals to get on-demand support for short-term projects. So what are micro-internships? I'm going to keep this very, very, very short. The way we've defined micro-internships since we pioneered the concept almost a decade ago, short-term paid professional projects completed by college students on behalf of busy professionals. These are projects that are similar to what a new hire or summer intern might be doing their first or second week on the job. They tend to take 10, 20, 30 hours of work by a student. We found that's the sweet spot. So it's short enough to be low stakes, low risk, not a big commitment for you or the student for that matter, but long enough to still get you insights on their skills, as we'll talk about. These are projects that students do independently. They don't require you to onboard or train or share data or systems. They can take place year round. The other thing that's really important to note is there's no HR, administrative, or legal burdens. The students are employees or contractors at Parker Dewey. Again, they're not accessing your system. There's no temp to perm or conversion fees. Again, we've removed every point of friction so that you can use these as a recruiting tool. As one of the college students described micro-internships, they're like going on job dates, where the summer internship is like getting engaged and the full-time role is getting married. Now, what we found is these micro-internships are more than just a project. Again, while a student might be completing one of these 10, 20, 30-hour professional assignments, you're getting all of these additional insights to help you power your campus recruiting efforts. Again, whether it's student-specific insights on their skills or level of interest, but also insights tied to geography, tracking down candidates from certain locations, understanding if there's certain schools or programs where you're having more success, cost per hire, retention, all of this incredible data is driven by these individual projects. And to use this, it's really easy. As we'll show you, all you need to do is share a job description for an existing role or summer internship that you already have. Once that's done, we take care of creating the micro-internship. You can review the applicants. Typically takes about 15 minutes in total, and we'll show you what that looks like. We suggest hosting a brief kickoff call with the student. Again, another 15, 20, 30 minutes. And then when the student's submitting the micro-internship, tends to take about an hour, assuming there's multiple students that you're reviewing. So again, this example, it's a project where they might be picking 5 students to do it. They're going to spend 10, 15 minutes reviewing the work. Again, total commitment on this, under 90 minutes over the course of, again, this example, about 3 weeks. Some other practices that we'll see companies use is sometimes they're engaging ERGs or young professionals or other hiring managers who love this, whether it's to give back or to engage with schools where they're alumni, or even just as that extra set of hands. Sometimes they'll do check-in emails or have students present the deliverable. Now, one of the things I said is we'll transform the entry-level role that you already have into a targeted micro-internship. So I'll show you an example of how that works. This is a company that's hiring an entry-level data marketing role. I pulled out most of the fluff of the job description, but this is the core of it. And as you'll see, they need to gather, analyze, and report marketing data. They need to be able to do a competitor analysis and provide recommendations. Well, we take that job description and based upon 10 years of data, we'll create a micro-internship that aligns to it. Again, do a competitive analysis. You'll notice this teases out some of the areas that are highlighted in the full-time job description. It's also a project that a student can do in 10 or 15 hours. It doesn't require that company to share any data or anything sensitive or access to systems. It doesn't require management or oversight. Again, fits within that criteria. And when the student does and completes the project, that company's getting interest or insights on their skills. It could be the technical skills associated with the role, like the ability to do market research or data analytics, but it's also those core skills that we know make the difference between a great hire and someone that may not work out as well. Again, the problem solving, the intellectual curiosity or professionalism. All of that's conveyed in the deliverable. So let's jump into a few examples of how employers are using this. And as I said, this ranges from small organizations, large nonprofits, startups, Fortune 100, and everyone in between. So in the first example, this was an employer struggling to see traffic at the career fair. It's a healthcare organization that is highly competitive, both for roles tied to healthcare. So think nurse practitioner or X-ray technician. But this hospital system also had other roles, marketing, sales, finance. They would show up every year. and see crickets sometimes in this highly competitive environment. So what they did was they posted some micro internships before they were on campus. It allowed them to highlight their company to students and really differentiate from all of the other email messages or communications that students were receiving. They were posting projects and students were applying. And in this case, when that company showed up at Florida A&M to recruit at the career fair info session, they already had a pool of candidates that were actually interested in their company. They had raised their hand and expressed interest, not through a one-click job application or an AI tool that automatically applied, but through real interest when they were applying to these micro internships for this organization. The students had invested some time to answer a short answer question, to proactively express interest. The results of this, 300% increase in the career fair traffic, packed information session. And again, what was really interesting to me is a large percentage of those students were ones that weren't previously considering the organization. It led to incredible hiring outcomes for it, especially in those tough to fill roles like finance or marketing or HR. In the second example, this was a company that was seeing students showing up to the info sessions or career fair booth, but they were struggling to keep them engaged. As we talked about, 50-something% of students say they are blocking recruiter emails. They're not engaging. They've told us that they don't want more info sessions. They don't want more webinars. 95% plus of students have said the best way to recruit them is give them these real projects. Well, that's exactly what this organization did. That after the event, they were reaching out to students saying, how would you like to work on a micro internship for us? You can do a real paid project where you're getting, again, real experience and you're getting to know who we are. At the info session and career fair, they actually had a screen up at the table highlighting some of the micro internships they'd be offering exclusively to the students who visited their booth. This was incredible. And the effectiveness was, again, a 3 times increase in the email engagement rates after the info session, after the career fair. What they were also finding is a massive improvement in offer to hire rate, because not only were they getting students engaged after the events, but they were building that relationship between the student and the company, leading to better conversion. The third example ties to that application avalanche. So this is a company that's in the healthcare space. It's actually a fitness center brand that most of you would probably know because they're a national chain. They were finding that they were getting massive numbers of applications. Again, on average, we've seen 182% increase. This company was seeing something that was actually a greater multiple than that. One of the challenges they were finding, though, was getting applicants who were actually qualified and interested. They were seeing some that wanted to be a trainer at one of their locations, even though they were hiring for an HR role, or others that just weren't the right fit. So again, they posted a micro internship tied to their job description. In this case, they were hiring for a full-time HR role, and they were really interested in best practices for new hire onboarding. It was a project that they were trying to get done anyway, so they decided to use it as an audition. They selected multiple students to do that project. One student was a 3.9 from a very prestigious school who was studying HR. The project was review best practices for new hire onboarding, create a PowerPoint presentation that highlights it with a one-page executive summary. This was the one-page executive summary that the student turned in, the 3.9 HR major. There's some good data in here, but there's also some typos and some grammatical errors. And candidly, it hurts my eyes to look at even when you're not seeing it on a Zoom screen, even if you were seeing it full size. In contrast, they picked another student. She had a lower GPA. She was studying something in humanities or liberal arts. I don't remember. She didn't go to a focus school, but there was something about her application that stood out. This is what she turned in. Notice the difference between these two. So this student first had great information. She also communicated in an effective way, showing strong communication skills, but also empathy. She's able to put herself in the mind of a hiring manager, a busy professional. Great attention to detail, no typos, all of those things that are really difficult to assess from a resume or even an interview stood out in about 5 seconds of a review of the work product. Ultimately, that student was hired for a summer internship, and 2 years later, she's still at the company in a full-time role. And this is someone who, in the words of the hiring manager, they probably wouldn't have even considered in their normal process. Again, the outcome overall beyond that individual student, 80% faster time to hire. Again, less quote unquote wasted time in interviews or flipping through resumes or doing phone screen. They found a 70% lower cost per hire and 98% first year retention. Again, using this as essentially a job audition. The final example is a Fortune 500 company that was going through some budget cuts. And in particular, the HR team focused on campus recruiting had its budget cut dramatically, so it wasn't able to go to as many campuses as in the past. In addition, there were some larger strategic conversations taking place within the organization about should we even have an early career program? Are we going to be replacing that with AI? We have hiring managers who are frustrated. Why are we doing this? So what this organization did was they wanted to prove the success and value of early career, but again, couldn't be on as many campuses and faced a smaller budget. So they reallocated some of the capital that they were using on sort of email blasting tools and job boards and whatnot, and offered students micro-internships, again, tied to their entry-level roles. They were able to drive better hiring outcomes, but also capture the data to show the efficacy of their efforts, show the average cost per hire, show the retention, show they were able to target students with ties to certain geographies, show that the students were outperforming, target students, again, different majors, backgrounds, graduation dates. Ultimately, what happened is not only were they able to protect their early career program, but they were able to grow it in subsequent years. They were able to make the case to the CHRO, CFO, and even CEO of the value of this. They were able to identify new schools where they hadn't had a presence and learn how to build those relationships without having to invest thousands of dollars on swag and booths and everything else, trying to compete with more well-known companies. They were able to, again, show the results and the connections to some of the other corporate initiatives. So overall on Parker Dewey, the impact is real. Whether it's around cost per hire, which tends to be 40 to 80% less than average, first year retention, which over the past 10 years has been north of 98%, or creating level playing fields. Again, when we talk about underrepresented groups, we're talking about student athletes that have the grit to survive and thrive in a role, but often get missed in the recruiting process. First generation, Pell eligible, veteran, etc. Again, creating those pathways. Now, the nice thing for everyone on here is if you want to see this firsthand, you have the opportunity to do so without any cost. Through the very generous support of organizations like the ones named below and several others, you can try this out. You can send us a job description. We'll create the micro-internship for you. You'll get students, they can complete the projects, and you'll have the ability to see this firsthand with no lift and no cost. Now, again, the schools and other organizations are supporting this because it supports their initiatives. Bucknell is trying to help more of its sophomores do career exploration while helping employers recognize the great talent that's at the school. NOVA, the Northern Virginia Community College, is doing it tied to more technical roles. The state of Indiana is doing it tied to keeping talent within the state. IBM is showcasing the great AI skills that they're training students on. So again, it is a perfect way for you to try it with no cost, no lift, and no commitment. And what you get in addition to the individual projects is access to all of the data, access and the ability to build the employer brand, to see how effective and efficient it is, to drive conversion, and again, to see it firsthand with no lift and no cost. So again, whether you haven't yet begun your campus recruiting or you have upcoming visits to career fairs, let's use this concept, if you will, to start to build those relationships and make sure those programs are successful through the very generous support of those groups. If you've already been to the career fairs or info sessions and you have your pool of students who visited and clicked the QR code to sort of submit their name and resume, use this to keep them warm or engaged. or those first and second year students that you're not quite ready to give a summer internship yet to, but you can start to build the relationships, or to have that pool of talent for the last minute hiring requests that always seem to come in April or May. Or when you're evaluating candidates to get insights on their interests and skills before investing the time in phone screens and interviews and flying them to the offices. And again, if you can't be on campus, what a great way to reach and engage them. So the challenge I'll put out there and the offer I'll put out there is you can use the link at the bottom, and I'll try to put it in the chat, or the QR code. Send us a job description that you have. It could be a PDF, it could be a link, it could be bullet points. Send us a job description for a role that's challenging to fill, a role where maybe you're not going to have interns this year, but you really think you should, a role that you always get last minute requests for. Send it to us. We're happy to create some micro-internship examples that you can see firsthand. And if you like them, we can get them posted for you. You can see the students who apply. Again, no commitment. You might say, they're not the right fit. Okay, no problem. Or you might see they're great, and you decide to pick them to work on the projects. Again, through this very generous support, you can see their work firsthand, and they're still paid for it. Again, zero lift, zero commitment or cost. We're happy to take care of it, and we love to be challenged. We have an entire team here that works with companies creating micro-internships for them. Over the past 10 years, we've seen everything. Every industry, every department, every size organization. So we love to be challenged and see if there's something we haven't seen before. We'll certainly let you know if we can't do it, but we're pretty good at it. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. Please feel free to use the chat. Did I do that good that I hit everything? Wow, I guess so. So some common questions that come up that I will hit. First of all, if there's specific schools that you know you're going to be at, when you're posting a micro-internship, you can certainly limit to them. Whether it's an individual school or a network of schools, like for instance, we're trying to do more with HBCUs. We can post projects exclusively for HBCUs if it's tied to certain geographies. So we're really having difficulty finding students with ties to Rockford, Illinois. We have relationships with local schools, but we want to reach students who grew up in Rockford, Illinois, but might be going to school in Florida or Texas or California. Again, we can focus as specifically as you want to really help get the right candidates for you. I see a question about the cost for more regular micro-internship work for you through us. Typical micro-internship, as I said, is typically between 10 and 30 hours of work by the student. And it tends to be about 20 to 25 bucks an hour as compensation. Now, a couple of things to be clear about. First of all of the projects are fixed fee. So if you have a project that you think will take about 15 hours and you set a price of $300, whether it takes the student 14 hours or 18 hours, you're paying the same $300. What we're trying to do with this concept of removing friction, of making it easier, we don't want you on the hook. If it took a student a little bit longer than it should have, we also don't want you to have any of those surprises that you budgeted $300 and someone's coming back and you owe $400. Now, fortunately, we've done this long enough that we're really, really good at knowing an appropriate scope for these projects. And if we see you post a project on your own that doesn't seem to align, again, you're not using the templates that we have or we don't build it for you, we will let you know. Again, we have an entire client success team that does that stuff. Again, students are paid by Parker Dewey. They are our employees for the duration of the project. So that $300 project that you posted, 90% of that goes to the student. The student sees it listed as $270. Parker Dewey retains that 10% difference. That covers our cost of processing the payment to the student. As you all know, sort of the banks charge fees for those things when we're sending the money. It also includes all of the cost of issuing them 1099s and other accounting and legal documents. I also want to highlight that if you're working with a micro intern and they're a rock star and you want to bring them on directly as a summer intern or full-time hire or apprentice or anything else, you always have that option without owing us any additional money. As one of my colleagues likes to say, we'll send you flowers, not a bill. Our goal is to get the students off our platform. We want them taking full-time roles in summer internships with your organizations. So we don't want to do anything that gets in the way of that. One other thing on cost that I want to highlight. Let's take that example I gave before of a $300 micro internship, and let's assume a company is actively trying to hire, I don't know, a new sales professional. They might post a project and pick 4 different students to do it. So each of those students is going to receive, again, the $300 in that example. So it's going to cost the company $1,200, of which, again, 90% is going into the student's pocket. And let's say of the 4 students that do the project, one is good but not great, and we have north of 98% success rate where hiring managers sort of expectations are exceeded, but there might be one that's not sort of a great job. Maybe there's a couple of typos, like the example I showed. Maybe one of the students did the project and realized it's not the right fit for them. Okay. And let's say 2 of them were really good that you decided to interview. And ultimately, let's take the worst case scenario. One of them turns into a full-time hire. You've spent $1,200 all in to make a full-time hire. That compares pretty favorably to the NACE average of $6,000. In addition, with that full-time hire, 98% of the time that student's going to be staying with your company at least a year. In fact, our data shows that 98% was tied to, I think, 1.5 or 2 years when we did the calculation. That's pretty good compared to that nearly 50% first-year turnover. So again, materially lower cost per hire, easier process, higher confidence when you're making that hire. It's a pretty compelling cost proposition, and everyone wins. The student's getting a great experience. They're getting to learn about your organization. They're confident in the fit. Your organization is able to recruit and hire great candidates with just such a high level of confidence and without so much frustration along the way, without sitting in the interviews that just the resume looked great, but why did I do this interview? Or even worse, bring someone in for a summer internship at realizing the first week it's not the right fit, or hearing from hiring managers frustration. All of that goes away with this. So with that, I urge you to use the link or QR code, challenge us with a difficult job description, that role that's hard to fill, whether it's because it's highly competitive, difficult location, requires a very specialized set of skills, or the purple squirrel, I guess, is the metaphor people use for that perfect candidate. We'd love to be challenged. We'd love to show you how this works, and happy to answer any other questions along the way. With that, this concludes. Oh, I see one more question. I'm sorry I missed that. Career counseling, working with grad students on Masters of Public Health. Yes, we do. We see a ton of those opportunities. And Michelle, one of the things we love doing, to your question, is collaborating with folks like you on campus in working with both the students and employers. Because I presume there's certain employers that you're working with that may not be recruiting as actively as you would like, or you're having trouble getting them to come to campus, or they're not seeing the conversion rate they would like, or any number of things. Where things go really, really well is when there's that collaboration between us and the school, when we can create that win-win, where you're able to help more employers come to your career fair because they're getting more out of it, when they're able to keep those students engaged, when the students are able to explore the plethora of different opportunities they have within public health or anything else. So again, I welcome the opportunity to spend more time with you. And we have an entire team that works specifically with colleges and universities, both at the undergraduate and grad level, on sort of that type of collaboration. Sorry I missed your question earlier. So with that, this concludes the webinar. Thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy week as everyone adjusts to the both post-holiday and post-New Year craziness. And really look forward to continuing the conversation. Michelle, certainly you can create an account to explore the opportunities. One thing we always like to highlight, though, is that through our collaboration with schools, what you'll see as a student, if you will, is going to be a little different based upon where you go to school. And I'm not talking about fancy Ivy League versus a state school or anything else, but it's based upon the engagement that the school has. Because again, there's a lot of intentionality. So for instance, if you're a Bucknell student, you're going to see different opportunities because Bucknell is very actively working with its employer partners to offer micro-internships tied to the recruiting that they're already doing at Bucknell, and to introduce new employers to Bucknell. So it's a very different experience. Again, if we're working with you, Michelle, on the Masters of Public Health, again, we'll make sure that your students are seeing projects specifically related to their interest, and we're going to do so in collaboration with you, not in competition. So thank you, everyone, for the time. Happy New Year. Really appreciate everyone taking the time. And with that, this concludes the webinar. Have a wonderful rest of the day and week.